Well, we made it, everyone. I was beginning to think that God didn't want me to preach this message, or there was something getting in the way of that. But alas, the skies have cleared and we're finally able to meet back. And I just want to tell God, thank you for that. Guys, I hope you have enjoyed your time off. And as we come together today, we're going to be talking about this series entitled The Armor of God. Now, you might be sort of familiar with it. Maybe you heard about it before. Maybe when you were a kid, or maybe you might know a little bit about it. But over the next 7 weeks, 8 including this one, we're going to be digging in and looking deeper into what it is about the armor of God that is so important. It was last year, towards the end of last year, that God just laid it on my heart that I needed to preach this message. Now, I didn't know why. It took me a while to figure out what even I would preach. But I want to let you guys know that because, this is important for God, for you. And I hope that you can take this time to really open your life up to God and see if He can't challenge you or push you maybe in ways that you need right now. But with the study of the armor of God, now, I wasn't really familiar with it. I'd heard it before, but, I was talking to a friend about it, and through him, it kind of really just got under my skin and into my heart that I needed to go through this. But when I started studying, I didn't have much of knowing what it was. I was kind of confused. It took me a long time before I could really grasp what was going on. But today, when we start out, when we say, what is the armor of God, we need to define what it is. What are we going to be spending 8 weeks on? Okay, what does it look like? Well, the beginning of this, we're going to be testing our knowledge. Now, everybody got a note card when they were walking in, or a piece of paper, because we ran out of some. But the note card is for you. And what I want you to do right now is go ahead and go through and write 1, 2, 3, and 4 on there. Leaving enough space beside it to write a short, just one word or maybe one letter answer. So just on your left or on the right or wherever, just write 1, 2, 3, 4. Now what we're going to do is we're going to, if you guessed it, yes, we're taking a multiple choice quiz to start the sermon out. Now, I'm sure all of you this morning looked at your spouse or your friends, your family, looked at me and said, I hope we can take a quiz this morning during church. Now, being sarcastic, obviously, because I doubt any of you did, but this is going to be a fun way to kind of test your knowledge and start to understand a little bit more about this thing called the armor of God. Now, I want to preface this with, you're not being graded, but you also can't cheat. Okay, your answers are your answers, whether you know them or not. Hopefully, as you go through this, maybe you can guess and get enough. By the end of the series, these are just going to be things you've already known. But with further ado, we're going to start the sermon looking at this question: what actually is the armor of God? Before we study it, we might want to figure out what we're even studying. So, what is the armor of God? We're going to ask 4 questions, and we're going to dig into this, what actually it is. So, the first question, if you can't read it, I'll read it out loud. It says, how many pieces make up the armor of God? So, within the armor of God, there are these pieces that come together that are made. Now, is there 1, 10, 6, or 4? A, B, C, or D. How many pieces make up the armor of God? Okay, let's see, which one is it? How many pieces make it up? It is 6, so congratulations if you got 6. Starting off on a strong note. So there's 6 pieces that make up the armor of God. Now I can hear you internally saying, what are the pieces? Well, let me turn around and ask you the next question. What is the first item in the armor of God? So we have the 6 pieces of the armor of God. So what actually is the first item that Paul lists? Is it A, a belt, B, a helmet, C, a crown, or D, a robe? Go ahead and take your next guess there. Belt, helmet, crown, or robe. Let's see what the answer is. The answer is A. Okay, it's a belt. It's the first thing Paul mentions within this idea of the armor. he starts to explain it, and he says, put on the belt. Now you might be saying, hey Bradley, when I'm putting on my clothes in the morning, I don't put my belt on first. You're right, good job. We're going to be looking more into this, but we're going to see that it isn't necessarily about the order in which you put it on. It's just the fact that you need to put it all on. But let's see, so we know what item is. Let's ask number 3, what is not? Question number 3, which is not a piece of the armor? Is it A, a shield, B, a breastplate? Is it C, a visor, or D, a sword? So which one of these is not listed when Paul lists his armor of God? A, B, C, or D? All right, let's see what it is. It is not a visor, and C is not in there. There is no visor. So we know that a shield, a breastplate, and a sword are 3 of the items. So let's go on, and this is kind of where we start to understand it. Paul goes through, and not only does he mention a piece of a Roman armor, he goes through and lists these 6 pieces of armor, but he also equates them with an idea about God or about our faith, with these different understandings. So without the shield, breastplate, or sword, we look at these topics that we're going to be looking at every week about what Paul equates that to. But let's learn a little bit more with question number 4. It says, what topic is not covered in the armor of God? So these topics that Paul covers, which one is not? Is it A, salvation, B, revelation, C, the gospel, or D, truth? Which topic is not covered by Paul in this armor? A, B, C, or D? All right, guys, this is the last one. If you're 3 for 3, you might make yourself 100, or you might lose it on the last round. Let's see what it is. The answer is B, revelation is not covered. So if you guys got 100%, I'll allow a little boasting after church, but not too much, okay? Let's keep it civil. So these are 3 of the topics covered in the armor of God. But here is how it looks, okay? The armor of God. This is the answer of what it is. The armor of God breaks up between the 6 pieces of armor and the 6 topics of conversation, or the 6 topics of understanding that Paul wants the church at Ephesus to know. So it starts off that there is a belt, and this belt is of truthfulness. So this belt of truthfulness. The second is a breastplate of righteousness. The third is shoes and the gospel of peace. Fourth is the shield of faith. Fifth is the helmet of salvation. The 6th is the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. So it is within these 6 areas that we're going to be spending the next 7 weeks, the 7th being prayer after this. But we're going to be looking through, and we're going to be looking at what it is actually that we're looking at. So it is with this, hopefully it kind of gives you that base knowledge. But before we get to any of this, you might be saying, Bradley, why does this even matter? Why are we even going to go through this? And then if you're asking that, great. If you're not, why is the right question? Because when I started studying and I started going through this, I had to ask God, why the heck does this even going to matter? When I preach, I get 1 hour at most out of people a week. Why am I going to spend 8 weeks looking at this armor? I had to figure out why and what was so important about it. So if you're asking that question, that's good. And if as we go to it, I want you guys, we're going to be in Ephesians chapter 6. We're going to be starting at verse 10. And if you guys have your Bibles open, or if you guys don't have your Bibles open, go ahead and open them. If you don't normally have your Bible out, I encourage you to open it up, because the first few verses of this area is so important. And the words are crafted in such a way that they really give us understanding. And I hope that you'll be able to just follow along with me and see the impact of these words. Now, before we go any further, there are 2 things that I want to mention that give us the context of where this story comes into. The first part of this is that Paul is writing this, and he's writing it to a church in Ephesus. There you go. Paul is writing to the church of the Ephesians. That's where we get the title of the book. But that's who's writing it and who he's writing it to. But the second thing is the reason why he's writing this book. Up to this point, it's been how Paul explains or calls a Christian live his life. So within that idea, within Paul really trying to get that across, what it's like, he ends with this illustration. He ends with the armor of God. We'll see when we start studying in just a second how he ties that in. But if you guys got time this week, or maybe any time throughout this series, go ahead and read the entire book of Ephesians. Because it's going to give you the context that this comes in its very end. Now, hopefully you guys have got your Bibles open, whether it's hardback, paperback, or on your phone, or Greek manuscript, whatever it is that you have. Hopefully you guys go ahead and have it open to Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10 is where we're starting. Verse 10. So verse 10 reads like this. It starts with finally. Okay, let's stop there. Finally. This first word, it gives us the focus of what we're about to get into. Okay? This word finally, Paul is saying, okay, all these things that I've written, all of these things that I've built up, all these things that I've explained, all these things that I've put in front of you, these ideas, all of this, now he says, finally. This is the last thing I'm going to talk about. This is the last thing I'm going to mention. Okay, here is his magnum opus, his final hoorah, his big point that says, okay, this is what I want to end with. This whole book comes and he says, finally. So that's what we're getting into. Okay, this illustration is a representation of Paul saying everything that I've talked about up to this point. Finally, okay. This is the armor of God, is what he's going on to say. Okay, this is why it's so important. This is why you need to put on the armor of God. This is the introduction to what we are about to learn. Finally. Again, it's a lot for just one word, but it's important to see that he brings all this up to this one point. And what we're about to get into is his final explanation. So he goes on, he says, finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Listen to this, listen to this, listen to this. This first sentence is so important because if we forget this one sentence and we go throughout the rest of the series, it's going to be a lot of trouble. Why? Because of exactly what it says. Listen to what it says. Listen to what it says. Be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Not yours, not mine. His mighty power. Say that with me. Be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Say it one more time for the people in the back. Be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Okay, see, it's his focus. We're going to be looking at a lot of things that go on about this story. This illustration, excuse me. We're going to be digging into it, and there's going to be a lot of things that we must evaluate. There's going to be a lot of things that we need to do. There's going to be a lot of things that it's about our relationship with God, but Paul makes it very clear right here that it is because of his power, not ours, that this is possible. If we forget this first verse, we're going to get 3 weeks or 4 weeks into it, and we're going to be trying to do all this. The series is going to be over. We're going to be trying to put it into practice, and we're going to fail one after another after another. We're just not going to be able to fully get it. We're not going to be able to fully grasp it. The winds of the world are going to come. We're not going to be able to do it, and we're just going to throw our hands up and say, you know what, it's not even true. Doesn't even work. There's no point in it. Because we thought it was in our power. But Paul makes it very clear. Everything that I'm about to say, this bracket of this section, is all because of his power. You must know this and you must remember it. Because this is not us. This is not because of our strength or our knowledge or our ability. This is because God has given us the ability to do this. It is because God, in His power, is allowing us, is enabling us to do this. Don't forget this first verse because it's so important. It is the bracket of this illustration. That all of this is because of His power. Don't forget that. So Paul opens up and he says, finally, after all of this, after everything I've said coming down, all of this to right here, remember, be strong in the Lord and in His mighty power. Let's see where he goes from there. He says, be strong in the Lord, His mighty power. So he's put on the full armor of God. Let's go ahead and stop there. He says the full armor of God, not the arm piece of God, not the helmet of God, not the sword of God. He says put on the full armor of God. Now you might be saying, Bradley, of course, that's the goal. But here's the thing. None of us would walk into war with a sword and a helmet and our boxer briefs, would we? It's ridiculous. You want all the armor you can, but so often we have these examples of this is the full armor of God, but we only like some of it. We only want to follow part of it. You know, some of it's easy and we'll do that, but some of it's tough and I don't really want to do that. Some of it I understand, yeah, I'm for them, but, you know, I don't really like that. But Paul says, put on the full armor of God, because without it, it is not fully effective. Without it, it's not fully effective. So he says, put on the full armor of God. So he says, put on the full armor of God so that, listen here, so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. Okay, ding, 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 ding. This is why this matters, okay? This is why the fight that we are about to get into, the explanation of the armor of God, this is why it's important. We know what the armor is. We know everything, the details and all of this stuff, but this is why. It's so that we may be able to stand against the devil's schemes. Now, if you look at the first 3 verses, first few 4 verses, really, if you want to get into it, this word stand is mentioned multiple times. And there's a couple of reasons why. One, we all know what standing looks like, okay? Right? We all stand. We know what it looks like. I'm standing here. But the thing is, me standing here in this place right now, there's not much of an attack of me to fall down. I'm safe. I'm fine. I'm standing here. I'm flat ground. There's nothing that's going to knock me down. But here's why he says it. He says, because the devil's schemes will try to do that. We just had a winter apocalypse, it seemed like. But if you tried to stand on some of that icy ground, something that was once normally so easy on this carpet becomes very difficult. If you've ever been in a huge gust of wind, a tornado comes through, standing has suddenly become a problem because what was once okay and once normal and once perfectly able has now become much more difficult. So what does Paul say? He says, this is the reason, so that you may be able to stand against the devil's schemes. Because you know what? He's scheming. He's got plans. So we don't like to think about that very much, but the devil is trying to put the ice underneath our feet. The devil is trying to bring the wind beside us and knocks us over and throws us away. But here's the thing. The importance of standing is because when we do not stand, we will fall away. So when Paul says the goal of the armor of God is so that you can stand, it's so that you will not fall or fly away. It is because God in His strength is going to give you the power to stand against the devil's schemes. And you know what that tells us? That tells us that the devil is not more powerful than God. It tells us that his schemes are not as strong as God's will. That's so important to remember, because if we remember there's nothing the devil can do that God cannot stop then we can stand. But it takes our faith and our knowledge in Him so that when the devil is scheming against us, and he will if he hasn't already, we will be able to stand. When you're living in your life and then one after another keeps pushing, you lose your job, you lose your house, you might not even be that severe, the thing you wanted to do, you couldn't do, and the things you didn't want to do are always happening. You wanted to do that, and that just fell apart, so you had to do this, and all these things are coming up in your life, and it looks like no one cares or nothing matters anymore. All these things are coming up. But God gives you the strength to stand. Because when those things happen, it will be so easy to fall away. It'll be so easy for a breeze to catch us up and take us away. But in His strength, when we have His strength, we can stand. It's so important. And I want to stress that to you. The why about the armor of God is so that when life comes and knocks you down and hits you in the side and you just want to get away and you feel like nothing's going right, it is because of the armor of God and strength that He has given you that you can stand in your tough times, okay? That is the reason. And it's so important. Because if you have not already, there will come a time in your life, ask any mature Christian, and they will say there was a time, there was a season, there was an area in my life, it just felt like I couldn't win. But if they've held on, and if they fought through, they will tell you exactly what it looks like to stand against the devil's schemes. So that's the why. But He's not done yet. Okay, this is the big reason. But He goes on and He explains it even more. He says, take your stand against the devil's schemes, for our struggle is not against blank and blank. Our struggle is not against blank and blank. Someone tell me what it is for me. Blank and blank. Flesh and blood. That's right. It is not against flesh and blood. What? Not against flesh and blood. Bradley, what are you talking about? You see, this is the struggle we all find ourselves. This is the trap we fall into. Is that we mistake people for the enemy. People are not our enemy. Flesh and blood is not our enemy. It doesn't matter if it's the hardest atheist, the person who hates Christianity. They are not our enemy. There's something much, much deeper at play. Because here's what happens when we make people our enemy, they stop being our mission field. When our enemy is our neighbor who does not like Christianity, there's no reason not to approach them about God. See, it becomes very easy to mark anybody we don't want to try to show God to is our enemy, because then we don't have to worry about it. But Paul says, no. People, flesh and blood, they are not your enemy. Because they are children loved by God. They have just been taken up and swept away. They need to be recovered. And they need to do the same thing you're about to do. They need to evaluate their life the same way you're going to. They need to stand with His power just like we do. Paul says it is not against flesh and blood. It is not against Richard Dawkins. It is not against atheists. It's not against Muslims. It's not against the people who follow Islam. It's not against anybody in their faith, no matter how much they hate Christianity. It's much, much deeper. And that's what he goes on to say. He says, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but it is against the rulers, against the authorities, and against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. This verse oftentimes makes Christians a little tingly, a little on edge, because we don't really think about this anymore. We come from the history of the Enlightenment period. We use reason. We stopped believing in angels and demons long ago. Hell? Nah, there's not a hell. Satan? No. Heaven? Maybe. Yeah. God? Hopefully. That's not what Paul says. Paul says there's something much, much deeper at play. That here in America, we don't talk about very often. If you were to go over in the eastern part of the world, they understand this. To them, they see past what is just in front of them. In America, and it's not just, it's our history, it's the way we've always done things. We only can reason what we can reason, so those things we can't explain, they aren't true. We've come to the point that hell is not a thing, Satan is not a being, God is hopefully up there, and hopefully heaven awaits us. But no, not anything, angels or demons, no. That's not what Paul says. I have a friend at KCU who's has been on multiple mission trips over to that area. And she says one of the biggest things American Christians don't realize is that when those people are praying to their gods, they're not just praying to nothing. They're praying to something. But that something is not our God. Let me say that again. Okay? Those people who are praying to their gods, they're not praying to nothing. They're praying to something. But that something isn't our God. They're praying to something and someone. And that's the people that Paul was talking about. That is our enemy. The devil and his schemes are our enemy. These things that he's doing, these areas of evil that he's set up, these religions that are awful, or these are the things that are working at the laws that are set up that hurt humans, hurt humanity. These are the things that we need to fight against. There are angels and demons, and there are demons who will try to do different things. There are demons who have created these false religions. There are demons that tempt us here and there. There is evil out there, but we can't focus it on a flesh and blood human, because that is a person loved by God. So what's Paul saying here? He's saying that our fight is much, much more against flesh and blood, but it's also not as easy as just flesh and blood. It takes a lot to fight this enemy. It takes a lot to change this enemy's nature. It takes a lot to rally behind God and His power and fight that evil. Because that's not as easy. We can go into much, much, much more in depth about this idea. And if you want to, we can always welcome to talk to me after church. But I want to keep going. So Paul says, no. Our fight, our battle is not against flesh and blood. It is against the powers. It is against the authorities. It is against the rulers, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, this is another comment. He says, therefore, okay, all of this reason why, the importance of what I just explained, the bracket of this illustration with God, and the reason we're doing this, all of this, therefore, what's he say? He repeats, he says, put on the full armor of God. You want to know how to fight this? Put on the full armor of God. You want to know why this is important? It's because it explains why you need to put on the full armor of God. Put on the full armor of God. That's our challenge. We got to put on the full armor of God. But listen why. He gives another reason. Therefore, put on the full armor of God so that, we know he's about to explain something. He says, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you have done everything, to stand. Paul says there will come a time when it seems like you just got hit in the side of the head with a sledgehammer, and all you want to do is curl up and just get away. There's going to come a time in your life, in a season in your life, where things aren't going right, when things just seem like they're not good. It seems like God has given up. It seems like you've just been attacked. Once after another, illness after illness, sickness after sickness, problem after problem. There's going to be so many things lining up that says, you know what, just curl up in a ball and get away, because there's no point in fighting it. Paul says, stand in that time. That's not easy. That's not easy. If you try to do it, it will hurt. It will be painful. But if you do it on your own, you won't succeed. That's why Paul prefaces all this by saying we need to put our strength in His mighty power. Because when we put our strength in His mighty power, in God's mighty power, then we look at this differently. Then it's a different ballgame. Then when all those things in your life hit you, when it seems like the job you wanted was taken away, when it seems like the hours you wanted can't come, when it seems like the vacation you wanted to go on is ruined, when it seems like nothing in the finances look like they should and everything is going wrong, all of that's going to come and you will be able to stand because of His mighty power. Because Paul says, when the day of evil comes, after everything, after all of it, after you've done everything, after the way that your life goes, after the ups and downs, the hills and the valleys, the tough times, the good times, the times you look back on and say, how did I get through? Maybe the times you're in right now where it seems like nothing is going right and God is not on your side and nothing is going the way you want it to. After all of these things have happened from the day you are born to the day you die, after all of this goes, and if you have your strength in His name, all of it, after everything, you will be able to stand. You will not fly away like the grass. You will not fall away like a shadow when light comes. You will stand strong. With hail that comes and beats down on you, with rain that tries to wash you away, with the ice that tries to make you fall, with whatever it is that the schemes of the devil has against you and your life, all of it will come and all of it will go, and you will be left to stand. That is the reason the armor of God is so important. Because you are going to be faced with so many things in your life where you don't want to stand, or you don't feel like you can, or you feel like everything is just going the wrong way, and God says, I've given you everything. And when you have faith in me, and your relationship with me is built, those tough times in your life will come and go, but you'll stay standing. Guys, that's all I got for you today. Hopefully you're encouraged. Hopefully it's lit a match underneath you. Hopefully, there's some exciting stuff, and I'm having a lot of fun. Hopefully you can come back for the next 7 weeks and we can have fun. But I want to leave you with one thing. I want you to just do one thing for me, okay? Remember that note card you had? You have 1 through 4, maybe you got 100%, maybe you got 0%. I want you to turn it on the other side, and I want you to write something. I want you to write the reason the armor of God is so important. It's because it's to stand against the devil's schemes. Stand against the devil's schemes. Because all of this stuff that we've learned about, all of these things in our life, all of these things are going to be happening, and you're going to have to justify why you want to spend 7 more weeks in this building learning about this illustration. It's because we need to learn how to stand against the armor of God. Now, I encourage you, put this in your wallet, put it in your purse, put it in your visor, put it in your car, whatever. Just look at it, because when Tuesday comes and you forgot about my sermon, hopefully that's not true. But when you see this, hopefully it reminds you to pray to God and say, you know what, over the next 7 weeks, God, I'm going to be devoted. I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to show with arms open wide, heart abandoned, souls on fire for you. Show me what you can do in my life. God, maybe it's a tough time in your life and you're just struggling and it seems like God is just not doing what He's supposed to do. Pray to God and say, God, speak to me in this next series. God, show me in this next series where I need to be, what I need to be doing. God, show me and help me for the next series. I encourage you to tell your friend what you're about to go through. Invite them if you want. But see what they have to say. See what they have to say about the armor of God. Maybe they've studied before. Maybe they can give you some insights. Maybe they don't know what it is, and you can start explaining it to them. But we have to justify, well, we're going to spend 7 weeks on this topic. It's because it's so important to learn how to stand against the devil's schemes, because if we do not stand, we will slowly fall away. I don't know where you're at right now in your faith. I don't know where you're at. Maybe you've been a Christian for a long time and you've been struggling. You've been stagnant. Maybe you've just been lit on fire with Christ and you just wanted to learn more and more. I hope you'll come back. I don't know where you are in the spectrum, whether you care or not. I hope over the next 7 weeks, you'll be able to find God in a new light. See Christ in a new way. Follow God in a much deeper way. If you guys want to go ahead and stand, I want to close by reading the verses we've went through. And after we've read them, I will close with a word of prayer. But go ahead and everybody stand up. If you're watching online, obviously don't stand up. I mean, you can if you want. But everybody else, come on, stand up, stand up, stand up. I want to close with just this word of God. If you guys got your Bibles open, feel free to follow along with me. But if not, Ephesians 6, starting in verse 10. It says, "Finally, be strong in the Lord and in His mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but it is against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you have done everything, to stand." Let's go ahead and close with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for the ability to be here for another week. God, I just want to thank you for the fact that we are able to be here and learn more about you. God, thank you for the ability to learn from Paul and what he has given to the church at Ephesus and what we can read and what we can learn from him. God, I pray for every heart here today, whether in person or watching later. God, I pray whoever is listening, that their hearts and their minds would be able to stay focused upon what we are going to go through. God, I pray that we would be able to be challenged to look to you, God. And I pray that you would break the ice around our feet, calm the winds that push us down, or be with us when we feel like all we want to do is curl up and fall away. God, be with us, challenge us, answer the questions we're looking for. And God, help us to stand. God, I pray that you be with everyone here today. As we go through the rest of the series, we would keep our hearts and our minds, our strength focused upon what you're doing and what we're called to do with you. God, thank you so much for being a God who cares about us and out of his own will gives us the strength to stand in the fight. God, thank you so much. It's your son's name that I pray. Amen.